All right, let's begin with prayer this morning. Our gracious Heavenly Father, we want to commit our time to you, even as we ask for your blessing upon our study together, as we investigate this wonderful gift that has come to us from you, the gospel, and help us, we pray, to follow the story itself, so that as we see the gospel not only as a word but as a concept develop, that we might follow its development to its grand conclusion in the appearance of Christ. And so we're asking this through Christ. Amen. All right, this is an open Bible kind of Sunday school. So I would like you to open your Bibles. I have, depending on how much time we have, I have some lengthy passages that I'm going to read, and I'd like you to read them along with me because I'm going to ask you to do some work for me. All right. We're beginning now with Isaiah, and the way Isaiah uses these euaggel words. He uses them 6 times. And when I say Isaiah uses these words, what I mean is the Greek translators of the Hebrew Bible translated Isaiah to use euaggel words 6 times. He uses the verb euaggglizo all 6 times, so the bearing of glad tidings. And all 6 occur, and this shouldn't be a surprise, in what we might call Isaiah Part 2, chapters 40 through 66. And all 6 occur in the context of Isaiah's eschatological visions. Now, can anyone tell me what I mean by eschatological visions? I've used that word thousands of times, but even now when I use it, it just doesn't, I'm not sure everybody knows what I'm talking about, so I don't want to take that for granted. What do I mean by eschatological visions? Don't be shy.
End of time vision.
Yes, as Isaiah looks to God's restoring work for Israel in the latter days, he's describing it ahead of time. Okay, so within the boundaries of Isaiah's ministry, he's not only bringing very sharp, hard words of condemnation on Judah, anticipating their exile to Babylon, but he looks past that to a restoration, to the end of the exile, which we might think is the end of the exile in Babylon. But as he goes on and on about these restoration promises, they seem to be taking on a character that can't be contained within the simple restoration of a people group who leave Babylon and return through, the rugged wilderness and arrive back in Judah to begin the work of rebuilding their city and their temple. Okay, so this is what's going on. This is what we spent 17 years on, I think, in Isaiah, right, when we went through it. And so much of the latter part of Isaiah is taken up with this vision of the future. And so I will offer a preliminary conclusion and explain why in a moment this conclusion is valid. Isaiah's use of euagglizo, bearing good news or bringing glad tidings, is determinative for the euaggel words meaning in the New Testament, broadly speaking, and in Jesus' ministry particularly. Okay, so when we turn the page and come to Matthew, and we encounter euaggel words, we're not starting from scratch. That's what I'm trying to point out here. Okay, that when Matthew and Mark and Luke and John use these words, the glad tidings, the bearing of glad tidings, they are dependent on Isaiah. Okay, that shouldn't be too difficult, but it's important for this study because we're asking the question, what is the gospel? Right? Is the gospel what we decide it is? Is it something that we define over and against another rival Christian denomination? Or is the gospel something that originates in the Bible itself? And whether we'd want to call it a technical term in the New Testament, I'm not sure. It may develop into that through its use. But when we open the New Testament and see glad tidings or the bearing of glad tidings, we're assuming that Isaiah is the source of it. And as we'll see, this isn't an arbitrary judgment on my part, like I just decided it would be Isaiah and not Joel or any other prophet. It's based squarely on the New Testament's dependence on Isaiah for understanding and interpreting Jesus' life, death, and resurrection. And here is what I mean. The first Isaiah passage that I'm going to cite is Isaiah 40, verse 9. When I cite it, I'm going to read the entire chapter, which is why you have your Bibles open to follow along. But this is key, and this is key to how to understand the relationship between the Old Testament and the New. Isaiah 40, that chapter, is directly cited or alluded to 26 times in the New Testament. So if you're reading your New Testament, you are going to find that the New Testament, either cites directly, that is with a quotation, this is what Isaiah said, or an obvious quotation, or it alludes to Isaiah 40 as a chapter 26 times. And as I counted those up, I tried to eliminate the duplicates we find in the Synoptic Gospels. Right? Do you know what I mean by that? If Matthew, Mark, and Luke all tell the same story, they might all include a reference to Isaiah 40. So I tried to, in my count anyway, I tried to eliminate the duplicates. So 26 citations or allusions to Isaiah 40 in the New Testament. That's pretty impressive. Now we're going to look at the specific verses, in this case the specific verse, in its chapter. But as I'm reading, the one thing I'm going to do that you can't do in front of you is I'm going to point out passages that are quoted in the New Testament and give you the references. Okay? So, assuming you've all pretty much understood Isaiah 1 through 39, right? You could probably recite long passages by memory. Rhonda, did you want to start with chapter 1? Yeah, no, I couldn't either. But it's important to see that the bad news of exile and Judah's entire complete failure that is characteristic of the 39 chapters sort of hits a brick wall, and we get a different sound and tone in Isaiah 40, 40 through 55, 40 through 66. In fact, the tone is so different that there are a lot of scholars, typically more on the, the left, I guess, the less conservative side, who think that Isaiah 40 through 66 is a completely different writer. So they call it Deutero-Isaiah, second Isaiah. So there's Isaiah 1 through 39, and then someone else, presumably someone who was kinder and gentler, wrote Isaiah 40 through 66. There's also a third Isaiah. If you break 40 to 55, the book of comfort, from 56 to 66, but none of that interests us. It's just a way of pointing out that the tone and the word choice changes suddenly, and you can even hear it in the opening words. Comfort. Comfort my people, says your God. Speak tenderly to Jerusalem and cry to her that her warfare is ended, that her iniquity is pardoned, that she has received from Yahweh's hand double for all her sins. A voice cries, quote, "In the wilderness, prepare the way of Yahweh." And you may have a footnote that has an alternative. A voice cries in the wilderness, open quote, capital P, prepare the way of Yahweh. So whether it's, we don't know where in the wilderness belongs. Is that where the voice cries, or is that where the preparation is supposed to take place? It's not really, in my opinion, an important distinction. They didn't have quotation marks in the Hebrew Bible. So going by ESV, a voice cries, "In the wilderness, prepare the way of Yahweh. Make straight in the desert a highway for our God." Matthew 3:3, Mark 1:3, John 1:23, all quote that passage from Isaiah. Now, what's the first thing you notice about the New Testament's use of this passage from what I just said? Real obvious, but I just want to make sure you see it. Yeah, there is a guy in the wilderness. What's that? Okay, even before we say John the Baptist, what did you notice from 3 citations or references, chapters and verses? Good. There is actually a third one in Luke, but Luke, well, we'll see that in a minute. Easy here, so you don't have to read my mind. What I'm looking for is, they're all early, all right near the beginning of the Gospels, right? So that when we open the Gospels, we find Isaiah 40 quoted sort of right at the beginning of the ministry of Jesus. Every valley shall be lifted up, and every mountain and hill be made low. The uneven ground shall become level, and the rough places a plain. And the glory of Yahweh shall be revealed, and all flesh shall see it together, for the mouth of Yahweh has spoken. Now, Luke 3, 4 through 6, also very early in the Gospel, quotes Isaiah 43 through 5, unlike his gospel contemporaries, the other writers, Matthew, Mark, and John. Why do you think Luke might quote? I don't want to get too far afield here, but this is what makes studying the gospel so interesting. Because what do you find if you're comparing the gospel accounts of Jesus' ministry? What's one thing that pops right up here? Why does Luke quote 3 verses instead of the 1? That's an anomaly. And scientists don't know what to do with anomalies, so they have to question them. Why? Why did you do that, Luke? Matthew, Mark, and John were quite content just to say, a voice cries in the wilderness. This is why the Bible is like, it's a source of endless study and fascination. Anyone, well, you probably won't get it. It's because you have to kind of know Luke. It's likely that Luke quoted the larger section because Luke is very inclusive in the ministry of Jesus. That is, all kinds of people come to Jesus in the Gospel of Luke, and he has a view toward the mission to the Gentiles. So he wants to get the words, "and all flesh shall see it," into his quotation. Okay, so yeah, Luke Acts would be more helpful. So we continue. I'm not going to do this every step of the way, but already, unlike most of the uses of euaggel words in the Old Testament, now we have a relationship between quotation and citation, quotation and allusion, where the gospel writer or the New Testament writer clearly has Isaiah 40 in mind, even if he doesn't say, and this comes from Isaiah, and a use of gospel, two euaggillizos in verse 9. So let me continue. A voice says, "Cry," and I said, "What shall I cry? All flesh is grass, and all its beauty is like the flower of the field. The grass withers, the flower fades when the breath of Yahweh blows on it. Surely the people are grass. The grass withers, the flower fades, but the word of our God will stand forever." And for the record, Isaiah 46 through 8 is quoted in 1 Peter 1, 24 and 25. Now we get to verse 9. "Get you up to a high mountain, O Zion, herald of good news." That is, the euaggelizomenos. That's the herald of the euaggel, the bearer, the carrier of good news. "Lift up your voice with strength, O Jerusalem, herald of good news. Lift it up, fear not. Say to the cities of Judah, behold your God," which is probably alluded to in John 12:15. "Behold, the Lord God comes with might, and his arm rules for him. Behold, his reward is with him, and his recompense before him. He will tend his flock like a shepherd. He will gather the lambs in his arms. He will carry them in his bosom, and gently lead those that are with young. Who has measured the waters in the hollow of his hand, and marked off the heavens with a span, enclosed the dust of the earth in a measure, and weighed the mountains in scales and the hills in a balance? Who has measured the Spirit of Yahweh, or what man shows him counsel?" Romans 11:34 and recently 1 Corinthians 2:16 both quote that line from Isaiah. Whom did he consult, and who made him understand? Who taught him the path of justice, and taught him knowledge, and showed him the way of understanding? Behold, the nations are like a drop from a bucket, and are accounted as the dust on the scales. Behold, he takes up the coastlands like fine dust. Lebanon would not suffice for fuel, nor are its beasts enough for a burnt offering. All the nations are as nothing before him. They are accounted by him as less than nothing and emptiness. To whom then will you liken God, or what likeness compare with him? An idol. A craftsman casts it, and a goldsmith overlays it with gold and casts for it silver chains. He who is too impoverished for an offering chooses wood that will not rot. He seeks out a skillful craftsman to set up an idol that will not move. Do you not know? Do you not hear? Has it not been told you from the beginning? Have you not understood from the foundations of the earth? It is he who sits above the circle of the earth, and its inhabitants are like grasshoppers, who stretches out the heavens like a curtain and spreads them like a tent to dwell in, who brings princes to nothing and makes the rulers of the earth as emptiness. Scarcely are they planted, scarcely sown, scarcely has their stem taken root in the earth, when he blows on them, and they wither, and the tempest carries them off like stubble. To whom then will you compare me, that I should be like him, says the Holy One? Lift up your eyes on high and see who created these. He who brings out their host by number, calling them all by name, by the greatness of his might, and because he is strong in power, not one is missing. Why do you say, O Jacob, and speak, O Israel, my way is hidden from Yahweh, and my right is disregarded by my God? Have you not known? Have you not heard? Yahweh is the everlasting God, the creator of the ends of the earth. He does not faint or grow weary. His understanding is unsearchable. He gives power to the faint, and to him who has no might he increases strength. Even youths shall faint and be weary, and young men shall fall exhausted. And this one is for your hand towels, if you're a Christian. You can get them at the Christian bookstore. But they who wait for Yahweh shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings like eagles. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not faint. Now I read the whole chapter, 31 verses, to provide as much context as I reasonably can in a Sunday school. And I'm following Dodd's rule. C.H. Dodd was a British New Testament scholar, and he suggested, pointed out, and I think correctly, that if the New Testament quotes an Old Testament verse, the point of quoting the verse is not simply go read the verse, it's go read the chapter. So it's not a quotation to kind of plug a hole in the New Testament argument. It's more like a footnote. Go back now and read this verse in its original context, and, says the New Testament writer, you'll understand what I mean. Okay? So, and this, I used to use this in many different ways for the Whitfield kids. In Bible class, we studied the Gettysburg Address because it's endlessly interesting, but it's also accessible to us as 21st century Americans because we know so much about the time in which it was written. And it's even an example of intertextuality, which is, you got to know that, if you want to be cool in biblical studies. So, yeah.
What is it?
Oh, it means text quoting texts. So even the Old Testament might quote itself later on as a way to refer back. So at the very beginning, Lincoln says 77 years ago, right? What are you thinking? And what happened in seven? See, everyone knows this, right?
Declaration
of Independence was written. And now that sets the tone for the entire address, right? That government of the people, by the people, for the people shall not perish from the earth. There was an idea. See, now if you show up at Gettysburg from Mongolia, you're going to, assuming you've learned English, you're going to go, first of all, what's a score? I know what a score is in a football game, but all right, you figure out score. Well, what happened, 87 years, what happened 87 years ago? Well, everybody in the audience knows exactly what happened 87 years ago, right? So here's the idea. If I just say in poetic form, as Lincoln did, 87 years ago, people probably don't even have to do the math. And they don't have to say, 1770, was that an important year? Right? It's observed annually as the anniversary of the United States. And they wrote a document which, from an Enlightenment point of view, claimed that all men were created equal. Well, there's a problem, isn't there, in the United States? In 1864, three. What's the problem?
we're not really living up to the ideal.
We're not living up to the ideal. So what do we got going on here? A new birth of freedom. Now, all of this is, you might call this an illustration of intertextuality, because Lincoln, in what is, I think, one of the 3-4 most famous speeches in American history, is referring us all back to a document. But he's not just referring to a line from it. He's referring to the entire document and what it represents to Americans. It resonates within us. It really has, it's packed with emotion, isn't it? If you're an American, if you're a Mongolian, you go, I don't get this. Why is this so important? That's how the Bible works. So if it just plucks out, it was very expensive to write in the ancient world, right? You probably had to get a professional to do it. Paper cost a lot of money. We have all kinds of documents from the ancient world where there are documents beneath the documents. Because paper was so expensive, they basically scraped off the original document, and it was like an Etch-a-Sketch. Now we have a clean slate to write on for this one. So the cost of ink, the cost of paper, the cost of the amanuensis, the specialist to produce it, all of this was very professional, time-consuming, and expensive. And so if the New Testament writer just says this little bit from Isaiah 40, he's saving space. He can't say, and now let me cut and paste Isaiah 40 into my document so you can see what I'm talking about. The illustration I used, 10 years ago or so, was the URL line in a document. If you click on it, the next thing opens up so you have the reference right in front of you. That's how these quotations in the New Testament work. Okay, so here I've just read all of Isaiah 40. We're playing our game, right? Where, let's put us into, we're Greek-speaking Jews. We trust the Bible as authentically Spirit-enabled so that its words are God's words. And we are trying to figure out what Isaiah is telling us in the year 125 BC. What's Isaiah trying to tell us? How do you read these words without the four Gospels?
The Lord will take care of Israel.
Okay, that's nice. But 31 verses, he's saying something here. Something that we don't have apps, we don't have phones, we don't have computers, we don't have anything. All we have is two guys in this whole room who know how to read, and we have a document.
The world won't work the way it works today. You don't run without growing weary. You don't walk and not get tired. So there's a change in the way the world works.
Okay, so we have some history. It's 125. What do we know in 125 BC? What do we know about our own people?
And up and down, up and down, up and down.
Yeah, for them, life is filled with downs and downs. Sounds familiar.
The downs are getting worse and worse and worse.
Yeah, do you feel we're all Greek-speaking Jews. Do you feel like whatever Isaiah was talking about has been fulfilled? Just at that level before we say anything else? No. Okay? Do you know enough about the history of Israel from the close of the canon to say the 1st century BC, before Jesus? Okay? Have we been an independent people? Who ruled over us?
Alexander and
Antiochus. So we went from one empire to another. Our own prophets, we're expanding our knowledge base here, have said, yeah, this is kind of disappointing, isn't it? But stick it out, it'll get better. Right, the post-exilic prophets. Yeah, the temple's kind of, it's a mere shadow of what it once was. But no, stick with me. It's going to get better. So we go back to this text and, come on, give it to me. What's he saying here to us?
This may be like really simple-minded, but to me it's just like overall hope.
Absolutely. And that's why we're reading it. Because we need that. And our experience, our on-the-ground, real-life experience, doesn't seem to line up with our return from exile. So, this is a kind of a goofy way to put it, but do you feel like our warfare is ended and our iniquity is pardoned? Right? And who was the voice? What's the message of the voice, by the way? Look down. Look down. Whitfield people, look down. Read the book. What's the message? This is crucial to the passage. What's the message?
Stick with your religion and become more religious.
No, not here. What's the message of the voice? What is it? No, there's a message in the voice. The voice has a message for everybody.
God is sovereign.
No. In the words of the wilderness voice.
Don't be afraid.
Nope.
Prepare you the way.
Oh,
You're asking us to read your mind.
No, I'm asking you to read the text. What's that?
Word becomes flesh.
Nope.
in the wilderness, clear way for the Lord, build a level road.
Okay, so tell me what that means.
It's come to an end. No.
Yahweh's coming back. That's what it means. Look at it again after I said that. Does that make sense? Let's get ready. Yahweh's coming back.
You're making a road for him.
You're making a route for him. So, what do you need to do to prepare the way? The road is all bumpy and there are... Level that out. And what about those valleys, which, are going to make the cart go dip? Or fill those in so you have a nice flat surface in order to prepare the way for Yahweh because he's coming back. See, you're all Christians, and you all have the God of the philosophers, the omnipresent, omniscient, the guy way, way up there. And the Israelites hear a message from Yahweh through his servant that says, I'm coming back to you. And he describes it as if he's actually coming back, as if he's going to walk back or be in a chariot or in some way. That's what the news is. Okay? That's simple-minded, Elaine, might be just what the moment calls for. So when we're studying this text in 125, we're Greek-speaking Jews who believe with all of our hearts that despite hundreds of years of frustration, disappointment, which should lead us to conclude that the prophets didn't know what they were talking about, and maybe the other gods of the nations are just as good as our God, we still believe that what Isaiah wrote makes sense. And it's for our hope and edification that we're going to grind through these texts. We have nothing else to do except working 18 hours a day to live. But we still need to do this. What went wrong? What went wrong at the end of the exile? Why did everything go south? Well, let's go back to the text. That's all we have. And we study it and we say, well, here, God said that we are to be consoled and comforted because our sins are forgiven. And if our sins are forgiven, that permits Yahweh to come back to us. Did Yahweh leave them? Yes, he did. You're all philosophers. Of course he left them. When did he leave them?
When he destroyed the temple.
When he destroyed the temple, but there's actually a record of him leaving Israel, right?
During Uzziah, right?
Ezekiel has a vision. Ezekiel's in Babylon, but he's transported back to Jerusalem. He gets the behind-the-scenes look at what's going on in the temple, and it's absolutely abhorrent. It's vulgar and pagan. These are the priests in the house of God. And so what he ends up seeing is the glory of the Lord rise up and drift away. God left Israel. See, that's why when people, this is what we're doing today. Do you not know that you are the temple of the Lord? Yes, so. If you say yes, so, or if you think, and therefore I should have a macrobiotic diet and work out twice a week, that's fine if you want to do that, but that's not what the point is. You need to know what the temple meant to the people. And otherwise, these words are just sort of like, oh, you're religious, or you're spirit-filled. But it's what the temple meant. God comes and goes, right? What happens when Moses builds the tabernacle? They finally finish, and what happens?
God filled it.
He fills it in such a way as it's unmistakable that the God of Israel does what?
Resides there.
He lives here now, right? Is this the house of God? This building? No, it's just a house, just an auditorium. I really don't like that. So if anyone says, oh, you left your Bible in the sanctuary, I'm going to ignore you. So be prepared for that. I'm not even going to look you in the eye or say thank you. This is not a sanctuary. A sanctuary is a holy room. This is an auditorium. Maybe we could say it takes on a holiness when the assembly is gathered here, but other than that, you might as well play shuffleboard in here. So, what happens when Solomon builds the temple?
Same thing.
Same thing, maybe even on a bigger scale, right? The priests are running for their lives to get out of the temple precincts because the descent of God's glory is so overwhelming that they might be consumed in it like someone would be consumed in a tornado. And this is where I think, and we'll close with this, this is what I think is the clash. It doesn't have to be a clash, but it often is between biblical theology and systematic theology. Systematic theology says, what is God? And we have an answer for that, and it's a perfectly good answer. But as soon as we start talking about God as omnipresent, for instance, we're moving out of the story of Israel where God's presence was local. And so when I would introduce this at Whitfield, younger students, they didn't get it because we know God is everywhere. Yeah, but the story itself actually says that the God of Israel localized himself in a building and he stayed there. And so when you walked by, you could see, oh, there's 13001 Quivira Road. That's God's address. And you could only get so close to it because you're not a Levite. So you could stand out there on Quivira Road, look at this building, again, pretending it's the temple, and say, back of those walls, the presence of our God is there. I like to think of it as if you went up to the wall from the outside, maybe if you snuck in somehow and you touch the wall, you hear this kind of faint hum, maybe a slight vibration in the wall to let you know that there is someone there. And who is there? He's not just God, he is the king. So the king is in his throne room, he is seated on his throne, and he presides over his people and rules them through his covenant. This is how Israelites thought. So when they read, a voice cries, get ready for God, he's coming back, they don't substitute modern religious ideas for the plain message of the text, which is God is coming back to Israel. Does that sound, we're getting ahead of ourselves, does that sound like good news to an Israelite, to people like us? We're about 60 years away from Pompey coming in, who will bring our people under the Roman Empire. So the short-term horizon looks grim. So is it good news?
Yes.
Thank you. It really, really is good news. And if it's not good news, then you can go home now, because the message from 1 Corinthians this morning assumes like this is the very best news anyone could possibly receive. That you are allowed to live in the presence of God. Not in some generic, esoteric way where we substitute God is near us for a good feeling, but where we're actually thinking spatially that we exist in proximity to the deity. You can get closer to the deity, you can get farther away from the deity. I'm using deity, of course, generically. How will that be possible, by the way, in the new creation? Or one way it will be possible. Well, we'll see how it's possible already in a moment, but where is the temple? Where is it first? You guys are getting a head start. This isn't typically the answer, but it's Jesus. Jesus is the temple. He says so, right? Explicitly. I'm the temple now. Okay, so if Jesus, the fully human, exists in the new creation, in that respect, apart from body of Christ theology, you can either be nearer to Jesus or further away. The proximity to the actual deity. That's how Israelites thought. And so if you guys are going to do the work of 2nd century BC faithful ones studying a text, you need to think like Israelites thought. It's in this context that we first find in Isaiah the euaggel words. There is good news. What is the good news, by the way? We'll close with this right at the end of verse 9, which matches up perfectly with what we just said about the voice.
Here's your God.
Yeah, look, God's coming. It's not, look, we can now be justified by faith apart from works of the law. That will come later, and that is part of the good news. But right here in Isaiah, if we had nothing else, we might think the good news was that God will come back to his people. And if anyone thinks I'm wrong, show me from Isaiah. Don't show me from Paul. Paul believes this. He quotes it. So this is our starting point. All right. Do your homework. There'll be a quiz next week.